Hey everybody, you know there's some coastlines around the world that look nothing like ones you've seen? They twist into these weird shapes, form crazy patterns, or create these illusions that defy explanations. I'm gonna count down 15 of the strangest looking coastlines in the world. Starting with number 15, Lake Sorvagsvatn, Faroe Islands. So starting off with a name that I cannot pronounce properly, I'm sorry to my friends in Iceland. Lake Sorvagsvatn, also known locally as Letisvatn, is the largest lake in the Faroe Islands, situated on the island of Vagar. Now what makes it stand out isn't just the size, but the optical illusion created by its placement on a cliff. From certain vantage points, it appears to float hundreds of meters above the ocean, seemingly suspended in the air. Now this phenomenon is purely a result of perspective and geography rather than, of course, any unusual elevation of the lake itself. In reality, the lake sits only about 30 meters above sea level. However, it lies close to the edge of cliffs that drop dramatically into the Atlantic. When viewed from the surrounding hills, the gentle slope of the land leading to the cliff edge is hidden, making the lake appear far higher than it really is. Now, the lake's proximity to the ocean is more than just visual. There's a narrow stream that flows directly from the lake into the sea, which cascades over the cliff as a waterfall. That outflow adds to the illusion. The waterfall itself is, of course, a notable attraction, particularly when storm swells crash against the base of the cliff while the fresh water pours over the edge. But the lake has had its fair share of controversies. It's been the subject of local territorial disputes. Two nearby villages historically argued over naming rights, leading to dual names for the lake of Soragur and the Lake of Leiti. While both names remain in use, the lake's unusual appearance has eclipsed the naming debate, making it one of the Faroe Islands' most photographed natural landmarks. Of course, hiking trails lead to the famous viewpoint above the lake, but the terrain can be pretty challenging here. The weather is notoriously unpredictable, with sudden changes in wind and fog that will obscure the visibility. But despite those challenges, the site has become increasingly popular with travelers seeking one of the most unusual coastal views in Europe. From an aerial perspective, the illusion of course disappears. The true relationship between the lake and the sea is clear when viewed from directly above. Yet on the ground, the effect remains compelling, showing how topography and human perspective can create one of nature's most convincing visual tricks. Number 14, Elephant Rock, Iceland. Alright, we're staying in Iceland for this next one, and this looks easier to pronounce. On the volcanic island of Heimaey, part of Iceland's Westman Islands archipelago, a coastal rock formation has gained attention for its uncanny resemblance to a giant elephant dipping its trunk into the sea. Known simply as Elephant Rock, this natural arch was formed from basalt. That's the same type of volcanic rock that makes up much of Iceland's coastline, and it owes its peculiar shape to a combination of marine erosion and geologic forces. Heimaey itself was formed by volcanic activity, most notably the 1973 eruption of Eldfell, which forced the evacuation of the island's population and dramatically altered its topography. The basalt here cooled into these column structures, which over millennia were sculpted by the wind and waves into the profile of an elephant's head, complete with a trunk-like extension descending into the sea. Unlike some rock formations whose resemblance to animals or faces is kind of a stretch of the imagination, the Elephant Rock's likeness is immediately recognizable. The head is well proportioned and the trunk aligns perfectly with the sea, creating a naturalistic pose that surprises many people. The formation is composed primarily of basaltic tuff and lava flow, products of explosive eruptions that deposited layers of volcanic ash and rock. The Westman Islands' exposure to strong winds and constant wave action ensured that the coastlines are in a continual state of change here, with new features emerging and old ones eroding. Now, Elephant Rock is accessible by boat tour that circle Heimaey, offering close-up views of the formation from the water. These tours often highlight the coastal features, including the sea caves, the puffin colonies, and the additional basalt arches. From land, the rock is visible from certain vantage points on the island, though the most striking perspective, where the full elephant shape is apparent, is from the sea. From above, you can see satellite imagery reveals its volcanic origins more clearly, showing the broader context of Heimaey's jagged coastline and lava flows. Yet at water level, the uncanny resemblance to an elephant dominates the scene. Elephant Rock's strange yet entirely natural appearance exemplifies the kind of coastal oddities that continue to fascinate geologists and regular people like me. Number 13. The Hook of Cape Cod, Massachusetts. Cape Cod, a sandy peninsula extending into the Atlantic Ocean from the state of Massachusetts. It's one of the most recognizable coastal landforms in the United States, and its northernmost curve, the hook around Provincetown, is particularly striking. From above, this part of the coastline forms a nearly perfect crescent shape curving back towards the mainland in a sweeping arc. The hook is a product of continuous deposition and the reshaping of sand driven by the ocean currents, tides, and storms, making it a rare example of large-scale landform that remains stable and dynamic. Over time, longshore currents transported the sand along the coast, extending the peninsula and creating this distinctive curved northern end. The hook around Provincetown Harbor is an especially active section, constantly reshaping by shifting sands that form spits, dunes, and flats. This process continues, with the coastline subtly evolving each year. One of the most unusual features here of this hook is the tidal flats, which are exposed during low tide. These flats reveal rippled sand patterns and tidal pools that stretch for miles, creating a contrast with the deep water just beyond the curve. The area does support a diverse wildlife, including migratory shorebirds and seals, which do rely on the ever-changing flats for feeding and resting. In summer, the waters off Provincetown also attract whales, making the region a hub for whale-watching excursions. The Pilgrims famously landed here in 1620 before continuing on to Plymouth, and the harbor later became a major center for fishing and whaling. But today, Provincetown is known for its tourism, art, culture, and its dramatic coastal setting that remains central to its identity. Despite its popularity, though, parts of the hook are surprisingly undeveloped. Much of the area is protected within the Cape Cod National Seashore, ensuring that its natural process continues relatively undisturbed. That protection is vital, as the same forces that created the hook also make it vulnerable. Storms, rising seas, and erosion continually reshape it. The Hook of Cape Cod, it remains a living demonstration of a coastal dynamic system, beautiful, ever-changing, and undeniably strange when viewed from above. Number 12. The Bay of Fundi, Canada. The Bay of Fundy, situated between the Canadian provinces of New Brunswick and Nova Scotia, is famous for having the highest tidal range in the world. This extreme tidal activity produces a coastline that transforms twice a day, exposing mud flats, sculpting the sea stacks, and creating tidal bores that surge upriver. The constant rise and fall of the water, up to 16 meters in some locations, has carved a landscape so unusual that it looks entirely different depending on when you visit. As the Atlantic tide pushes the water into the narrowing bay, the shape amplifies the effect. It causes the water level to rise and fall at extraordinary rates. Now, this process began happening for thousands of years, continually eroding the cliffs and depositing sediments to create these features unique to the region. Among the most iconic are the Hopewell Rocks, also called the Flower Pot Rocks. These are sea stacks topped with trees that are completely surrounded by water at high tide, but stand on bare ground at low tide, allowing visitors to walk among them. But beyond the famous rock formations, the mud flats and salt marshes here are equally strange. At low tide, miles of ocean floor are exposed, revealing intricate channels and ripple marks created by the retreating water. These mud flats provide crucial feeding grounds for migratory shorebirds, particularly the sandpiper, which stops here in the tens of thousands each summer to feed on nutrient-rich invertebrates before migrating to South America. But the tidal range of the bay creates other unusual phenomena. Tidal bores. These are walls of water that surge upriver as the tide comes in, occurring in several rivers that flow into the bay. These bores can be several meters high and are strong enough to reverse river currents temporarily. In addition, the constant movement of the water produces powerful currents and whirlpools, notably the Old Sow Whirlpool near Deer Island. It's one of the largest whirlpools in the Western Hemisphere. But from an aerial perspective, the Bay of Fundy coastline appears almost alien. The intertidal zones, which can extend for kilometers from the high water mark, form intricate branching patterns that resemble tree roots or veins. The contrast between the exposed mud flats at low tide and the submerged coastline at high tide is so dramatic that satellite images of the area can look like two completely different places, depending on what time they were taken. Number 11. The Waden Sea Mud Flats. The Waden Sea, stretching along the coasts of the Netherlands, Germany, and Denmark, is one of the most unusual environments. It forms a huge intertidal zone, meaning it's alternately submerged and exposed as the tides rise and fall, creating a landscape that changes dramatically every few hours. When the tide goes out, the sea retreats 4 kilometers, revealing mud flats, tidal creeks, and sandbanks, and at high tide the same flats vanish under the shallow water. This shifting coastline is part of the largest unbroken system of intertidal sand and mud flats in the world, and it's been designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site for its significance. The Waden Sea supports millions of migratory birds, including red knots, oyster catchers, and brent geese, which feed on the nutrient-rich invertebrates living in the mud. Twice a year, the area becomes a critical stopover for birds traveling between the Arctic breeding grounds and southern wintering areas, making it one of the most important bird habitats in the world. Now, over time, this dynamic interplay has created a mosaic of tidal channels, sandbars, and salt marshes that are constantly evolving. Strong winds and storm surges can reshape the coastline overnight, which alters the flow of the channels and expose or submerge vast areas of land. One of the strangest human activities associated with the sea is mudflat hiking, known locally as vadlopen. During low tide, hikers can traverse the exposed seabed from the mainland to the nearby barrier islands, walking for hours across rippled sand and mud. These journeys are only possible during specific windows and require knowledge of safe routes, as the tide can return rapidly, cutting off access and posing some risks. The featureless landscape during these hikes, with the horizon stretching unbroken in every direction, adds to the surreal quality of this coastline. But from an aerial view, the Waden Sea's patterns are pretty striking. The exposed mud flats form a branching tree-like network of tidal creeks and pools with subtle color variations marking different sediments and algae. This fractal-like appearance contrasts sharply with the deeper blue of the North Sea beyond, and the effect is so distinctive that the sea is often used in geography and earth science studies as an example of naturally forming fractal landscapes. Conservation efforts are coordinated across 3 countries, recognizing that tides and wildlife don't adhere to natural boundaries. Number 10. The Sundarbans Delta, Bangladesh and India. The Sundarbans, it's located at the mouth of the Ganges, Brahmaputra, and Meghna rivers. It forms the largest tidal delta and mangrove forest in the world. Covering roughly 10,000 square kilometers across Bangladesh and eastern India, this coastline is both immense and unusually intricate. Instead of a clear shoreline, the Sundarbans are a labyrinth of tidal channels and mudflats. The result is a fractal-like coastline that appears more like a web of veins than a solid landmass. But what makes it really strange is the way that fresh and salt water mix across its expanse. Twice daily, the tide inundates the forest, submerging the roots and reshaping mudbanks, only to retreat hours later and expose new surfaces. The mangrove roots form dense tangles that stabilize the shifting sediments, providing a crucial habitat for fish, crustaceans, and birds. The whole area is famous for its wildlife, most notably the Bengal tiger population that is adapted to this environment. These tigers are strong swimmers and have been observed hunting in tidal creeks. That's behavior rarely seen in other tiger populations. The region also supports crocodiles, river dolphins, and countless bird species, making it one of the most biodiverse areas in the world. Villages on the fringes of the Sundarbans are constantly threatened by erosion, flooding, and cyclones, forcing residents to adapt or relocate. Dikes and embankments have been built to protect farmland, but those structures are frequently damaged by storms there, highlighting the fragile balance between humans and natural forces. From an aerial view, the Sundarbans look unlike any other coastline. The dense green of the mangrove canopy is interlaced with silvery tidal channels that form intricate branching patterns. Now, unlike a typical delta that expands steadily into the sea, the Sundarbans outline is perpetually in flux, advancing and retreating with each monsoon and storm surge. However, the region faces mounting threats from sea level rise and increased salinity, which could alter its ecosystems dramatically in the coming decades. The coastline is strange, not because of any single dramatic feature, but because of its sheer complexity. It defies simple categorization as land or sea, forest or swamp. Instead, it's all of these at once, a living, breathing interface where massive rivers meet the ocean, and where the line between solid ground and shifting water is redrawn every day by the tides. Number 9. The Medulan Peninsula coastline. So the Medulan Peninsula, that's located in Croatia's Istrian region along the northern Adriatic Sea, features a coastline that appears unusually geometric when viewed from above. Unlike most shorelines that are shaped by irregular erosion, this stretch of coast is defined by sharp, linear edges and rectangular inlets that give it an almost man-made appearance. The peninsula is composed primarily of karstic limestone. Now that's a rock known for dissolving and breaking along joints and faults. And over thousands of years, wave action exploited that weakness, carving inlets and coves with unusually straight boundaries. In some places, the coastline forms right-angled turns that resemble artificial harbors or quarry cuts, even though they're entirely natural. This visual effect is enhanced by the clear waters of the Adriatic, which reveal submerged extensions of these linear patterns beneath the surface. While the broader Istrian coast is dotted with pebbly beaches and pine-lined bays, the peninsula here is especially notable for its grid-like appearance. The bays, of course, provide sheltered waters that are ideal for swimming and boating, and the unique shape of the shoreline has influenced human use for centuries, from fishing to modern tourism. The peninsula's natural harbor and strategic location here made it attractive to the early settlers, including the Romans, who established villas and small ports nearby. While later development has transformed parts of the region into tourist hotspots, many sections of the coastline remain in their natural state. From an aerial view, the peninsula's coastline looks like a puzzle piece, kind of, with a straight edge that seems incongruous amid the organic curves of the surrounding land. These patterns are really visible around Cape Kamanjak, a protected nature park at the southern tip of the peninsula. Here, the coastline is a mix of jagged cliffs, narrow coves, and small beaches, with clear demarcations that make the land-water boundaries seem sharply drawn. Despite its popularity with tourists, though, strict regulations limit construction and protect the park's natural features, preserving both its ecological value and its unusual visual character. The sharp lines and rectangular bays are purely the result of natural processes acting on rock over immense periods of time, showing that coastlines can look designed even when shaped only by the waves, the wind, and the stone. Number 8. The Hexagon Pool Coastline, Golan Heights, Israel. The Hexagon Pool is located in the Forest Nature Reserve in the Golan Heights of Israel. It's one of the most unusual formations in the region. While much of the Golan is characterized by volcanic plateaus and rolling hills, this site reveals a geometric pattern rarely seen in coastal environments. The pool's defining feature is the series of towering basalt columns that form its walls, natural hexagonal pillars that rise vertically from the water. These formations result from ancient volcanic activity, yet the uniformity and precision give them a distinctly artificial look when viewed up close or from above. Now, the origin of the Hexagon Pool's formations date back millions of years during a period of intense volcanic activity in the Golan Heights. The basaltic lava flow spread across the land, cooling relatively quickly as they were exposed to the air and moisture. Now, that rapid cooling caused this rock to contract and fracture along predictable lines, producing these long hexagonal columns. Now, this process is known as columnar jointing. It's the same that formed famous sites like the Giants Causeway in Northern Ireland and Fingles Cave in Scotland. But in the Golan Heights, the result is integrated into a freshwater pool fed by a seasonal river, a rare inland counterpart to more typical coastline examples. Now, what makes the site even stranger is the setting. The columns form a high-walled canyon through which the stream flows. At one section, the stream pools into a deep, tranquil basin, the hexagonal pool itself, and here visitors can swim surrounded on all sides by near-perfect geometric pillars that rise as high as 5 meters. Although inland today, the geology of Golan Heights is closely tied to ancient coastlines. During the Miocene and Pliocene epochs, shifting sea levels and tectonic activity repeatedly flooded and drained the Jordan Rift Valley. Volcanic eruptions during those periods laid down extensive basalt lava flows that would later be carved by rivers and seasonal floods. Then, over millions of years, erosion exposed the columnar joints in dramatic fashion. The result is a place where a pool retains the memory of ancient coastlines in its volcanic rock. The site's name in Hebrew, Brekat HaMashushim, translates directly to the Pool of the Hexagons, a reference to the six-sided shapes that dominate the formation. While modern geology explains the process behind the formation, the site's symmetry still evokes a sense of wonder that scientific facts do not diminish. Moving on to number 7, the Chocolate Hills Coastal Outliers. So while the main formation of the Chocolate Hills is inland on the island of Bohol, several of the lesser-known hills extend towards the island's northern coast, where they meet the sea in a way that creates one of the strangest landscapes in Southeast Asia. These dome-like mounds, nearly perfect conical hills, appear in clusters even near tidal areas, giving the shoreline an appearance more typical of volcanic islands despite their limestone composition. The Chocolate Hills are a geological oddity. Over time, rainwater and erosion sculpted the limestone into symmetrical conical shapes. This is a process that usually happens inland. What makes these outliers strange is that the same conical pattern extends almost to the water's edge in certain areas. The hills are unusual because they are karst formations that look volcanic but are not the result of eruptions. Instead, they originated from the ancient coral reef material that solidified and was later exposed to weathering. The consistency of shape, smooth, conical, and evenly spaced, is rarely seen in these kinds of landscapes, especially so close to the sea. And during the dry season, the vegetation on the hills turns brown, which creates that chocolate appearance that gave them their name, and this visual effect extends to the coastal hills as well. In most karst regions, hills of this kind are surrounded by valleys or inland plains. On the northern coast of Bohol, some of these formations descend almost directly into the tidal zones. Few other coastlines in the world combine these symmetrical geological features with intertidal habitats. Now, from a cultural perspective, including the coastal extensions, the Chocolate Hills are deeply embedded in the Philippine folklore. Legends describe them as the remnants of giant battles or the tears of mythical beings. Although these stories primarily reference the inland hills, the coastal ones share the same distinctive shape. Their proximity to fishing villages, too, means they've also served historically as navigation markers for local mariners. From an aerial view, the contrast is pretty striking. Smooth, rounded hills that just rise abruptly near the mangrove-lined shores and tidal flats. They remain less visited than their inland counterparts, but largely because they're outside the main tourist route. However, the unusual meeting of landforms and ocean makes them one of the strangest coastlines in the Philippines, and a unique example of how a process like this can shape similar things in very different settings. Here, blending perfectly symmetrical hills with the dynamic edge of the sea. Number 6. The Rekenes Peninsula Lava Coastline. Alright, we're back in Iceland, and I can actually pronounce this one. The Rekenes Peninsula in southwest Iceland hosts one of the most geologically active coastlines in the world, marked by lava fields that plunge directly into the Atlantic. Unlike typical sandy or rocky shores, this coastline is composed almost entirely of solidified basalt from the repeated volcanic eruptions here, creating a fractured edge that looks otherworldly. This peninsula sits on top of the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, where the Eurasian and North American tectonic plates diverge. This rift zone produces frequent volcanic activity, including fissure eruptions and shield volcanoes that blanket the landscape in fresh lava. The result is a young, ever-changing coastline, where black cliffs, lava arches, and isolated sea stacks emerge from the surf. One of the most unusual features along the coast is the presence of geothermal activity right at the shoreline. Steam vents and hot springs dot the area, and in some places, geothermal waters flow directly into the ocean. This rare combination of volcanic and marine events makes the coastline visually unique. The presence of sulfur deposits and steaming fumaroles along the coast adds to this strange, almost alien atmosphere. And of course, the coastline is also home to some significant bird life. Seabird colonies nest on the cliffs here, taking advantage of the updrafts and the abundant food supply. Offshore, the cold waters are rich in fish and plankton, which supports both local fisheries and marine mammals like seals and whales. Rekenes has a cultural and historical significance too. It's been a key fishing region for centuries, and many old lighthouses and fishing stations dot the coast. The lighthouse here, Iceland's oldest, stands on a prominent cliff and has guided mariners since the 19th century. Today, the area is part of the Rekenes UNESCO Global Geopark, and it's recognized for its landscapes and geothermal phenomena. From above, it appears like a jagged black ribbon against the blue of the North Atlantic, with visible fissures and craters extending inland. Unlike smoother coastlines shaped by erosion over millions of years, Rekenes is geologically young. Some lava flows are only a few centuries old, giving it a raw, freshly formed look. This is a place where the land and sea meet, in a setting that feels closer to another planet than to typical ocean shores in the world. Number 5. The Coronian Spit. The Coronian Spit is a narrow 98-kilometer-long sand dune peninsula that separates the Coronian Lagoon from the Baltic Sea. Stretching between Lithuania and the Russian exclave of Kaliningrad, it's one of the most distinctive formations in Europe due to its extreme thinness and unusual double-sided shoreline. At its narrowest, the spit is barely 400 meters wide, creating the impression of a thread of land adrift between two bodies of water. The spit's formation is entirely natural, but it's strikingly geometric in its simplicity, a single elongated curve that arcs along the Baltic coast. Of course, it originated thousands of years ago, as wind and currents deposited sand along a glacial moraine. Over time, shifting wind sculpted the massive dunes, some of which reach heights of up to 60 meters. The dunes migrated gradually inland, sometimes burying forests and villages in the process. Historical accounts from the 16th and 17th centuries describe entire settlements being swallowed by advancing sands, a process still visible in exposed, dead dunes, where tree trunks protrude from the sand. One side lies in the open Baltic Sea, with long exposed beaches and waves. On the other side lies the Coronian Lagoon, sheltered and shallow. Standing at certain points on the spit, you can see both coastlines simultaneously, separated by a narrow ribbon of dunes and pine forest. Parts of the spit are protected as national parks in both Lithuania and Russia, and in 2000, the entire formation was designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site for its landscape. A rare example of a human-modified dune ecosystem maintained through centuries of cooperation between people and nature. The contrast here is heightened in winter, when snow covers the dunes, or in summer when the pine forests form green patches amid the gold sand. The spit's near-perfect arc makes it one of the most recognizable features in the Baltic coastline, and a favorite subject for satellite imagery. Number 4. The Bunda Cliffs. The Bunda Cliffs, located along the southern edge of Australia's Nullarbor Plain, form one of the longest uninterrupted lines of sea cliffs in the world. Stretching for more than 100 kilometers along the Great Australian Bight, these sheer limestone walls rise up to 90 meters above the Southern Ocean, creating a coastline so linear it appears almost as if the continent has been sliced cleanly at its edge. The cliff marks the boundary between the arid Nullarbor Plain and the open ocean. They're composed of the fossil-rich limestone deposited during the Miocene epoch around 15 million years ago, when much of the region was submerged in a sea. As the sea level fell and tectonic uplift happened, the plain emerged, leaving behind a flat, treeless expanse that terminates abruptly. The result is a coastline of astonishing simplicity. No bays, no inlets, just a continuous wall of rock plunging into the sea. From above, they form razor-sharp demarcations between land and water. The contrast here between the limestone and the deep blue of the ocean is pretty striking, particularly in satellite imagery where the straightness of the cliffs defies your expectations of a natural coastline. The Great Australian Bight is known for its powerful swells and rich marine life, including southern right whales that migrate to some sheltered bays nearby to calve. During the whale season, the cliff provides exceptional vantage points for observing these animals from land. But ecologically, the plain above the cliffs is pretty sparse. It's characterized by shrubs and salt bush that's adapted to these arid conditions. The name Nullarbor itself comes from the Latin nullus arbor, meaning no trees. That's a pretty apt description of this flat, treeless expanse. The Bunda Cliffs are largely undeveloped. They're accessible mainly by a highway which runs parallel to the coastline, and a series of lookouts offer some safe views. But the remote nature of this region means there are few facilities here, and the isolation has protected the cliff's beauty, allowing visitors to experience one of Earth's most uncompromising coastal landscapes. Number 3. The Giants Causeway. How could we not include this one? The Giants Causeway. It's located on the north coast of County Antrim in Northern Ireland. It's one of the most famous examples of columnar basalt formations. Now, what makes it really strange is the near-perfect geometric shape of the rocks here. Around 40,000 interlocking basalt columns, mostly hexagonal, rising and falling like a series of steps that lead into the sea. These columns were formed about 50 to 60 million years ago during intense volcanic activity. As the molten basalt lava cooled rapidly, it contracted and fractured into these polygonal shapes. While similar formations exist elsewhere, like in Iceland and California, the Giants Causeway is one of the largest and most visually striking examples. From the sea, these columns form natural terraces that rise over the water's edge to cliffs more than 30 meters high. These steps create unusual tidal pools and provide habitats for marine organisms that cling to the surfaces here. At low tide, visitors can walk across the stones, while at high tide, the waves crash over them, showing the rugged meeting of geometric rock and ocean. And of course, we have to talk about this. It's long inspired myth and legend. According to Irish folklore, the columns were built by the giant Finn MacCool as a bridge to Scotland to fight a rival giant. Across the sea in Scotland, at Fingles Cave on Staffa Island, similar basalt formations exist, fueling this mythological link between the two sites. While the scientific explanation is well established, these legends remain a celebrated part of the local culture. Aerial images of the Giants Causeway reveal the geometric regularity of the columns more clearly than any ground-level view. The sharp-edged polygons contrast with the irregular coastline around them, creating a surreal impression when viewed from above. The symmetry of the rock pattern, the way the land seems to have crystallized into these perfect shapes, is what makes this coastline so visually striking and so unlike typical rocky shores. Despite its fame and popularity, though, conservation here is a major concern. Heavy foot traffic can wear down the tops of basalt columns, and visitor access is carefully managed. The strange beauty of the causeway continues to captivate tourists and geologists, even storytellers, offering one of the most unusual coastlines on the planet, a place where geology appears to mimic architecture on a monumental scale. Number 2. The 12 Apostles. The 12 Apostles, located along Australia's Great Ocean Road in Victoria. It's one of the most recognizable formations. This series of towering limestone stacks standing isolated in the surf of the Southern Ocean has captivated travelers and geologists alike for decades. But what makes it so remarkable isn't just the dramatic beauty or the geological story behind it. A story of ancient seas, millions of years of erosion, and an ongoing process that continues to reshape the landscape. Despite the name, they were never 12 stacks. When European settlers first named them in the early 20th century, 9 stood tall. Today, only 8 remain. Understanding this coastline requires delving into its origins, the process that carved these monumental columns, and the cultural significance that's made them one of Australia's most visited landmarks. The 12 Apostles are made of limestone, depositing during the Miocene epoch, roughly 10 to 20 million years ago. During this time, much of what is now southern Australia was beneath a shallow sea. Marine organisms like corals and shellfish accumulated on the sea floor, their calcium carbonate shells compacting over millions of years into thick layers. When the sea level fell and the land uplifted, these limestone layers were exposed to the elements, forming the coastal cliffs we see today. The uniform pale yellow and cream hues of the limestone are a hallmark of this region's geology. The Southern Ocean is among the most energetic in the world. It's got powerful swells generated by the unbroken roaring 40s winds that circle Antarctica. These waves crash against the Port Campbell limestone cliffs, and they exploit natural weaknesses like joints and fractures in the rock. Over thousands of years, the sea carved the caves into the cliff face. The caves grew larger and eventually broke through, forming arches. The process is ongoing. Every stack visible today is simply in one stage of a continual cycle of formation and destruction, and future apostles will form even as existing ones eventually succumb to the waves. Now, the scale of the apostles is one of their most impressive features. They rise up to 45 meters above sea level. They tower above like natural skyscrapers. Standing at the viewing platforms along the Great Ocean Road, visitors often remark on how small ships and birds appear next to the pillars, underscoring their immense size. Human interaction with this coastline dates back thousands of years, way before European exploration. The Gundit Jamara people, traditional owners of this land, have lived in the region for tens of thousands of years, and their culture is tied to the coastline and its natural features. With the arrival of Europeans in the 19th century, the Great Ocean Road region became an important shipping route. Nearby Lockhart Gorge, named after a famous shipwreck in 1878, is a reminder of the coastline's hazards. The 12 Apostles themselves weren't widely known about to the outside world until the Great Ocean Road opened in 1932, providing easier access to the shore and transforming it into a premier tourist attraction. Now, the name 12 Apostles itself is part of the coastline's allure, though it is something of a misnomer. Early settlers originally referred to the formations as the Sow and Piglets, with Muttonbird Island being the sow and the stacks the piglets. In the 1920s, as tourism in the region grew, they were renamed the 12 Apostles, a more majestic and marketable title, despite the fact that fewer than a dozen stacks were ever present. In 2005, one of the stacks dramatically collapsed without warning, crumbling into the sea in a matter of seconds. Such events like this highlight the ongoing erosion that continues to sculpt the coastline. In addition to the well-known apostles, the surrounding coast features other strange formations too created in the same process, including the London Arch, formerly London Bridge before a partial collapse in 1990, the Grotto, and the Razorback. Each one of these tells a different chapter of the same geologic story, showing insight into how the landscape evolves over millions of years. Number 1. Fingles Cave. Fingles Cave. It's located on the uninhabited island of Staffa in Scotland's Inner Hebrides. It's one of the most unusual coastlines in the world. The cave here is formed entirely of hexagonal basalt columns, the same phenomena seen at Northern Ireland's Giants Causeway. But here, those columns form the walls and ceiling of a vast cave rather than an exposed coastal pavement. When viewed from the ocean, the entrance to Fingles Cave appears like a grand vaulted hall carved by hand, yet it's entirely natural. The cave owes its existence to, of course, volcanic activity that happened about 60 million years ago. During this period, molten basalt flowed across the region and then cooled, which fractured into the columns. But what makes the cave especially strange is the acoustics. The hexagonal columns and vaulted shape create an echo chamber where the sound of waves crashing inside resonates. This natural reverberation impressed visitors for centuries, and it inspired composers, writers, and artists. Most famously, the cave moved composer Felix Mendelssohn to write his Hebrides Overture in 1829 after hearing the echoing waves within. Romantic poets like Wordsworth and Keats also visited here, marveling at the cave's cathedral-like qualities. Access to the cave is only possible by boat, and conditions around the island can be unpredictable due to the Atlantic swells. But visitors who land on it can follow a narrow basalt pathway along the water's edge into the cave itself. At low tide, it's possible to walk deep inside, surrounded by perfectly angular columns rising straight from the sea. At high tide, however, the caves flood partially and entry is restricted for safety reasons. From an aerial view, the coastline is rugged and jagged, but Fingles Cave stands out as precise and geometric, like an anomaly. The surrounding cliffs also consist of columnar basalt, but only at this location have the waves carved deep enough to create a vaulted interior. Culturally, the cave remains a symbol in Scottish heritage and folklore. Its name, Fingal, refers to a legendary hero in Gaelic mythology, celebrated in the Ossianic poems of the 18th century. The mythological associations, combined with the otherworldly appearance, have made it a subject of fascination for centuries and a frequent stop on Scottish heritage tours. Today, Fingles Cave is protected as part of the National Trust for Scotland. Its preservation ensures that people can continue experiencing one of the most extraordinary coastal formations in the world, a place where geology, music, and myth converge in a single natural wonder.